My vegan daughter called me a monster and tried to get me fired from my own job. My vegan daughter, Lily, stormed into the steakhouse where I've worked for over a decade, screamed at the top of her lungs that I was a monster, and got me officially reprimanded in front of my boss and the entire kitchen staff. When I confronted her about it later, my voice shaking with a fury I rarely feel, she just rolled her eyes and said, with an unnerving amount of condescension, "You should be grateful I didn't get you fired." I didn't say a word back to her in that moment. I couldn't. The mix of raw anger, profound betrayal, and a strange, hollow kind of shame was so thick in my throat, I thought I might actually choke on it. That was 3 weeks ago. This morning, I found her crying in the garage, sitting on the cold concrete floor beside her unplugged, empty vegan-only refrigerator, the full weight of the consequences from her crusade finally crashing down on her small, 17-year-old shoulders. My daughter decided to go vegan about 6 months back, and it was like a switch had been flipped in her head. It wasn't a gradual change. It was an overnight conversion. One day, she was our regular teenage daughter, picking pepperoni off her pizza and complaining about her algebra homework. The next, she was a missionary, a zealot who had seen the light and was now determined to drag the rest of us heathens out of our cave of carnivorous ignorance. And let me be absolutely clear, my wife Sandra and I honestly did everything we could to support her choice. We didn't get it, not really. I'm a man who considers a perfectly cooked, medium-rare ribeye to be one of life's great, unimpeachable pleasures. But she was our daughter, our only child, and we loved her more than anything. So we adapted. We did what good parents are supposed to do. We designated 2 nights a week as vegan family meal nights, which meant I, a professional chef at a steakhouse, was now learning to cook with things like nutritional yeast and seitan. We spent a small fortune on specialty vegan products that seemed to cost 3 times as much for half the quantity. My grocery bill started to look like it belonged to a family of 6. We took her to a fancy, ridiculously overpriced vegan restaurant for her birthday, where I paid $12 for a cashew cheese appetizer that tasted like sad, gritty library paste and smiled like I was enjoying it. We didn't just throw money at the problem, either. We did our homework. We sat with her and watched the documentaries she insisted were life-changing, enduring graphic images of factory farming that turned my stomach. Not because they made me want to give up meat, but because the cruelty was genuinely appalling. Sandra, bless her ever-supportive heart, even gave it a real shot herself for a couple of weeks, but she ended up feeling tired and weak, her iron levels plummeted, and it just didn't work for her. I can respect the cause. I truly can. I understand the ethical and environmental arguments. But that lifestyle just isn't for me. The problem wasn't her being vegan. The problem was that Lily seemed fundamentally, constitutionally incapable of accepting that we did not want to be. Our home, once a place of relative peace and comfort, became a culinary and ideological war zone. If Sandra and I were eating something as simple as grilled chicken or a piece of fish, Lily would walk into the room with a dramatic, long-suffering sigh, grab her plate of quinoa and kale, and stomp upstairs to eat alone in her room. She would then refuse to speak to us for the rest of the day, punishing us with a heavy, judgmental silence for the grievous crime of enjoying a burger. The tension in our house became so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. It escalated as these things often do. Soon, she refused to have her food even touch a plate that had once held meat. We had to buy new cutting boards, new knives. Then came the refrigerator issue. She claimed she could not, in good conscience, allow her healthy, cruelty-free food to be stored in the same appliance as what she now referred to exclusively as disgusting murder meat or rotting corpses. So, we bought her a separate mini fridge and put in the garage. Her own little vegan sanctuary. She wouldn't stay in the same room as us if we were eating meat, which meant that the only time we ate together as a family was on our 2 designated vegan nights. The rest of the week, our family dinners were fractured, disjointed affairs, with Sandra and me eating at the dining table while Lily ate in her room, the silence between us feeling more like a chasm. She was also incredibly vocal about her newfound moral superiority. It wasn't enough to live her own life. She had to be the narrator of ours, providing a constant, critical commentary on our choices. She would leave pamphlets with graphic images of slaughterhouses on the kitchen counter for us to find in the morning. She would loudly narrate the suffering of a dairy cow while I was trying to put a splash of milk in my coffee. We were no longer her parents. We were cruel animal killers, speciesists, and carnist oppressors. We tried talking to her gently at first. We sat her down and explained that while we respected her choices and were doing our best to support them, she needed to respect ours as well. We told her that her behavior was creating a hostile and unhappy environment in our home. Each time, her eyes would well up with tears, and she would say, her voice trembling with a sincerity that was impossible to argue with, "I just care about the animals so much." How can you not? It was a conversational checkmate. How do you argue with that without sounding like a heartless, indefensible monster? The main point of contention, the final, unmovable object in her path of righteousness, was my job. I've been a chef at Richardson's Steakhouse for over a decade. It's a good job, a secure job. I worked my way up from a nervous kid on the line to a respected sous chef position. It provides a stable income, good benefits, and a sense of pride. I'm good at what I do. And yes, to be completely honest, I absolutely love steak. The smell, the sizzle, the art of cooking it to a perfect temperature, it's a craft. Every now and then, as a perk of the job, my boss will let me bring home a prime cut of meat at the end of a long shift. Lily had seen me enjoy this particular perk many times before her conversion, but now it drove her absolutely, certifiably insane. About 2 weeks before the incident that set our world on fire, I brought home a beautiful New York strip. As I was searing it in the cast iron pan, the rich, delicious smell filling the kitchen, Lily came downstairs. The look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated disgust, as if I had been cooking a roadkill squirrel. "The next time you bring a corpse into this house from that murder factory," she said, her voice low and trembling, "I will boycott that restaurant. I will stand outside, and I will tell everyone who goes and what kind of monster works there." I chuckled. I actually laughed, thinking she was just being overly dramatic for effect. It was a joke, right? A ridiculous, over-the-top threat from a passionate teenager. She just glared at me with an intensity that should have been a warning, then spun around and went back upstairs without another word. I honestly forgot the conversation even happened. It was just another drop in the bucket of her daily theatrical pronouncements, another line in the ongoing drama of our family life. So, 2 days before the protest, I did it again. It was a long, brutal shift, and my boss offered me a perfect, marbled ribeye to take home. I didn't think twice. This time, when I cooked it, Lily didn't say a word. She just stood in the doorway of the kitchen and watched me with cold, hard eyes, a strange, calculating look on her face that I now recognize as the calm before the storm. The very next day, a busy Friday lunch service, she made her move. She stormed into the restaurant during the absolute peak of the rush, holding a huge, crudely hand-painted sign that read, "Richardson's, serving murder since 1998. She began marching between the tables, chanting about animal cruelty and the horrors of the meat industry. Our manager, a good man named Dave who has always treated me like family, tried to calmly ask her to leave to take her protest outside. That's when she pulled out her phone and started live streaming the entire thing to her growing legion of online activist followers. She specifically called me out by name, her voice amplified by the restaurant acoustics. "Sam, the chef," she screamed, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent dining room as every patron and staff member turned to stare at the kitchen doors. "Come out here and face your daughter. I am ashamed of you. I am ashamed to be related to someone who profits from the torture and the systematic killing of innocent, sentient animals." She stayed for a full 20 minutes. 20 excruciating minutes of screaming, yelling, and accusing our patrons of having blood on their hands. She disrupted the entire restaurant. Several tables of customers got up and left, their faces a mixture of discomfort and annoyance. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, my white chef's coat suddenly feeling like a costume of shame, watching my own daughter systematically attempt to destroy my livelihood, my reputation, everything I had worked for over the last 10 years. I was reprimanded heavily in the owner's office after the police finally arrived and escorted her out. My boss was beyond furious, and I couldn't blame him. I was told in no uncertain terms that if another incident like that ever happened again, I would be fired on the spot. No second chances. I was mortified, humiliated, ashamed, but mostly I was incandescent with a rage I had never felt before in my life. I came home, and we had the biggest argument of our lives. I called her disrespectful, entitled, and profoundly selfish. I told her she could have gotten me fired, that she had put our entire family's financial security at risk for a childish stunt. She just retorted, her arms crossed defiantly, "Maybe you should get fired from that slaughterhouse." "That slaughterhouse," I yelled, my voice hoarse, "is what puts the expensive vegan food on your plate. It's what keeps the lights on and this roof over your ungrateful head." We got nowhere. It was like shouting at a brick wall of self-righteous, unmovable certainty. Later that evening, in a moment of cosmic, dark irony, it happened to be one of our designated family vegan nights. Lily came downstairs, seemingly having completely compartmentalized and forgotten our earlier war of words, acting as if nothing was wrong. She was actually excited, chattering about the new vegan chili recipe Sandra was trying. She was therefore very, very surprised to see an 8-ounce filet mignon sitting on all of our plates, including hers. She just stood there and stared at the plate like I had just served her a steaming pile of actual poison. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish out of water, before she finally managed to find her voice. "What is this?" she whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the dining table, so hard her knuckles turned a stark white. I calmly picked up my knife and fork and cut into my steak, deliberately making sure she could see the perfectly pink, juicy interior. "Dinner," I said. My wife, Sandra, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, pushing the piece of meat around her plate with her fork. She hadn't touched it yet, perpetually caught in the crossfire between supporting me and desperately trying to de-escalate every situation. The dining room, usually a large and open space, felt small and suffocating, the silence crackling with unspoken tension. Lily shot up from her chair, so fast it screeched loudly against the hardwood floor. You think this is funny? You think this is some kind of sick, twisted joke? I took a bite of my steak, chewing slowly and deliberately, savoring the flavor. It was cooked to perfection. Medium rare, just the way I liked it. No joke, I said after I swallowed. Just dinner. She grabbed her plate, holding it up with two hands as if it were a piece of evidence in a courtroom. This is assault. This is literally assault. You are assaulting me with a piece of a dead animal. Sit down, Lily, I said, my voice coming out much calmer than I actually felt. My chest was tight with the leftover anger and humiliation from the incident at work, a knot of resentment that was finally starting to unravel. Instead of sitting, she marched over to the kitchen trash can and, with a dramatic flourish that was pure theater, dumped the entire plate in. The perfectly cooked steak, the roasted potatoes, the asparagus, all of it. The ceramic plate hit the bottom of the plastic bin with a loud, final-sounding clang that echoed in the quiet room. Then she turned back to face us, her eyes blazing with a righteous fire. I cannot believe you would do this to me. After everything I've told you about animal suffering, after all the documentaries I've made you watch, after you try to get me fired, I interjected, setting down my knife and fork with a deliberate clatter. After you publicly embarrass me in front of every single one of my coworkers and my customers, after you threatened the very job that keeps this roof over your head and pays for your special vegan cheese. She crossed her arms, a familiar, defensive posture. That job is blood money. Every single paycheck you bring home is covered in the blood of innocent, sentient beings who just wanted to live. Sandra finally spoke up, her voice pleading, desperate to find some common ground. Lily, please, can we just try to talk about this calmly? There's nothing calm about murder. Lily's voice cracked, and I could see she was working herself up into one of her signature, impassioned speeches. Do you have any idea how many cows die every single day for human consumption? Do you know how they're kept in tiny, filthy spaces pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, living in their own filth until the day they are enough? I stood up, my own chair scraping back. The word came out sharper and louder than I intended, but it had the desired effect. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at me with wide, shocked eyes, her mouth still slightly open. You want to talk about respect for life? I said, my voice low and shaking with a controlled fury that had been building for months. Let's talk about respect for your family. Let's talk about how you have turned every single meal in this house into a moral battlefield. Let's talk about how you can't even sit in the same room as the two people who raised you, who love you, who have done nothing but try to support you. Because you're eating corpses, she shrieked, the volume of her voice startling in the tense silence. We're eating dinner. I shot back, my own voice rising to match hers. We have been eating dinner the exact same way for the past 20 years. Long before you watched the documentary and decided that animals were more important than your own parents. She let out a bitter, harsh laugh that held no humor. More important? You think this is about what's more important? This is about right and wrong, good and evil, and you are on the wrong side of history. I'd had enough. This was pointless. I picked up my plate and walked past her into the living room. If she wouldn't eat with us, fine, but I was done letting her ruin another meal with her sanctimonious, accusatory preaching. Sandra followed a moment later, her own plate in hand, and a look of profound sadness on her face, leaving Lily standing alone in the dining room, fuming in her solitary righteousness. We ate in silence on the couch, the mindless drone of the evening news providing a welcome distraction from the deafening silence of our fractured family. I could hear Lily banging pots and pans around in the kitchen, presumably making herself something from her sacred special fridge. 20 minutes later, she stomped up the stairs to her room without so much as a good night, the slam of her door echoing through the house. The next morning, I woke up early and went to let the dog out, only to find my work clothes strewn across the front yard. My chef's coat, my checkered pants, my apron, even my plastic name tag, all scattered across the damp, dew-covered lawn like some kind of bizarre, textile-based crime scene. The automatic sprinklers had already run their cycle, so everything was soaked through and covered in wet grass clippings. I stood there on the front porch in my pajamas, the cold morning air raising goosebumps on my arms, and just stared. This was escalating. This was no longer about teenage rebellion or ideological differences. This was a targeted campaign of disrespect, a deliberate act of aggression. I slowly walked across the lawn, gathering up the wet, muddy clothes, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. When I came back inside, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly eating a bowl of oatmeal and scrolling through her phone as if it were just another ordinary Tuesday morning. Did you throw my work clothes outside? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet as I dropped the wet, dirty bundle onto the kitchen floor with a sodden splat. She didn't even bother to look up from her screen. I don't want symbols of oppression and murder in my house. My house, I said, the words coming out low and sharp. Last I checked, I pay the mortgage on this house, with the blood money I earned from my oppressive, murderous job. Sandra came downstairs then, her face still soft with sleep. She took one look at the wet clothes on the floor, at the thunderous look on my face, and immediately went into her default peacemaker mode. What's going on? Sam, Why are your clothes all wet? Ask your daughter, I said, my eyes still locked on Lily. Lily finally looked up from her phone, her expression one of pure, unadulterated defiance. I'm taking a stand. If he's going to force meat on me and work at a place that tortures animals, I'm going to make it clear that his job, and anything associated with it, is not welcome here. You, I said, pointing a trembling finger at her, are going to pick up every single piece of that clothing, take it to the laundry room, and wash it. Now. And if you ever touch my work stuff again, you will find that special little fridge of yours sitting on the curb with the rest of the trash on garbage day. She stood up, her chair scraping back, leaving her half-eaten bowl of oatmeal on the table like an offering. I'm not touching those murder clothes. Then I'm not buying one more carton of your special $12 almond milk, or one more block of your artisanal tofu, or any of it. You're cut off. Mom will buy it for me, she said with a condescending smirk, looking pointedly at Sandra. I turned to my wife, who looked torn and miserable, a refugee in her own home. No, I said, my gaze returning to Lily. She won't. Not if you continue to disrespect me and this family like this. This ends today. Lily's face turned a blotchy, furious red. This is abuse. You're literally threatening to starve me. There's a refrigerator and a pantry full of food in this house, I said, my voice as cold as ice. Food that is perfectly edible and, in many cases, vegan. You just choose not to eat it. That's your choice, but your special privileges, the ones we have generously provided, are now revoked. She grabbed her backpack from the chair where she dropped it and stormed towards the front door. I'm going to school, she announced to the room. At least there, people understand what real compassion means. After she left, the silence she left behind was heavy and suffocating. Sandra quietly helped me gather up the muddy clothes from the floor. We didn't talk about what had just happened, but I could see the deep, worried lines etched around her eyes. This was getting worse, not better, and neither of us had any idea how to stop the runaway train our daughter had become. That evening, I came home from work and, with deliberate and calculated intent, placed another large, plastic-wrapped steak on the kitchen counter. The crinkling of the wrapper sounded unnaturally loud in the otherwise silent kitchen. Sandra was standing at the sink, her shoulders tense as she dried the same dinner plate for what must have been the third time. Sam, she began, her voice hesitant and full of a weary dread. Maybe we should just let it go for tonight? Let what go? I asked, tearing the wrapper off the meat with more force than was necessary. The fact that she threw my work clothes on the lawn this morning, the fact that she's actively trying to get me fired from a job I've had for 10 years, the fact that she treats us with nothing but contempt in our own home. Which part should I let go of, Sandra? She sighed a long, tired sound and turned from the sink to face me. Her expression held that particular, heartbreaking mix of exhaustion and deep concern that had become her default look over the past few months. I know she crossed a line, Sam, a huge line. But bringing home another steak right after what happened this morning, it just feels like you're trying to provoke her. I'm not provoking her, I said, sprinkling salt and pepper on the meat, my movements sharp and angry. I'm living my life. In my own house. I am cooking the dinner that I want to eat. If my very existence and my dinner choices provoke her, then maybe she's the one who needs to examine her own reactions. As if on cue, we heard heavy, angry footsteps thundering down the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway, her face already a mask of fury. She had changed out of her school clothes and into one of her many activist t-shirts. This one featured a photorealistic and frankly disturbing cartoon cow crying behind prison bars with the caption, "Meat is murder," printed in what looked like blood-red font. "You're doing this on purpose," she hissed, her voice trembling with a barely contained rage. "You're literally cooking another corpse in front of me just to make a point." "I'm cooking dinner," I replied calmly, placing the steak in the hot cast iron pan. The loud, satisfying sizzle filled the room, a sound I usually loved, but which now felt like a declaration of war. It's something I've done almost every night for the past 20 years, long before you decided to turn every single meal into a moral battleground. She stepped further into the kitchen, her hands clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists at her sides. "This morning, you threatened to throw away my fridge. You threatened to starve me. Now you're flaunting another dead animal in my face. You are the one who is escalating this. You threw my uniform on the lawn." I shot back, my eyes fixed on the steak as I flipped it over, a perfect dark brown crust forming on its surface. "You tried to get me fired. You live-streamed a protest from inside my workplace where you screamed my name. You're the one who is escalating, Lily. We're just reacting to your constant attacks." Sandra, ever the diplomat, physically moved between us, her hands raised in a gesture of peace as if trying to calm two snarling dogs. "Both of you, please, you need to calm down. This family is tearing itself apart over food choices." Lily let out a laugh that was sharp and bitter and held no trace of humor. "Food choices? You think this is about food choices, Mom? This is about murder. It's about exploitation. It's about Dad working at a place that literally profits from the suffering and death of other living beings." "That place that profits from suffering," I said, my voice low, and even as I transferred the perfectly cooked steak from the pan to a plate to let it rest, has kept you fed, clothed, and housed your entire life. It paid for your private school tuition, your dance lessons, your summer camps, every single thing you have ever wanted. Blood money, she spat, the words dripping with venom. Every dollar is soaked in animal suffering. Every dollar, I corrected her, is earned through honest, hard work. Work I've done without a single complaint to give you the kind of opportunities and privileged life I never had. She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen with a furious energy. Well, maybe it's time that people knew exactly what kind of person you really are. A bully who torments his own daughter for having a conscience. Lily, what are you doing? Sandra asked, her voice filled with a new level of alarm as she realized what was happening. Telling the truth, Lily said, holding up her phone to show us her social media page, a new post already typed out, about how my own father force feeds me meat, about how he threatens to starve me if I don't abandon my principles and conform to his carnist agenda. I set down my knife with careful, deliberate control. You are twisting everything into a lie. We have supported your choice from day one. We eat vegan meals with you. We bought you a whole separate refrigerator. We have bent over backwards to accommodate you. And this is how you repay us. You serve me murdered animals, she shrieked, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. You bring home body parts and you wave them in my face. You work at a slaughterhouse and you act like it's something to be proud of. It's a restaurant. I yelled back, my own control finally snapping. A legal, reputable business that serves food that people choose to eat. And yes, I am proud of my work. I am proud that I can provide for my family. I am proud of the skill and the craft I have honed over 10 years. She jabbed at her phone screen with her thumb. Posted, she said with a triumphant, malicious sneer. Let's see how proud you are when everyone in town knows what you really are. Sandra made a desperate grab for the phone. Lily, take that down right now. You cannot put our private family business on the internet. Lily yanked the phone out of her reach. It's too late. It's already shared to 3 different platforms. People deserve to know the truth. I picked up my plate with the steak on it and walked out of the kitchen, refusing to give her the satisfaction of another reaction. I was done. Behind me, I could hear Sandra pleading with Lily to reconsider, to think about the consequences of what she had just done. But I knew that look in my daughter's eyes. She had tasted the intoxicating power of self-righteousness, and she had found it was a drug she couldn't resist. The next morning, my phone was blowing up before my 5:30 a.m. alarm even had a chance to go off. 17 missed calls. 43 text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. My social media, which I rarely use for anything other than keeping up with distant relatives, was a firestorm of hundreds of notifications. I scrolled through the messages, a cold, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Lily's post hadn't just been shared. It had gone viral overnight in local community forums and national vegan groups. She had painted a masterful, manipulative, and almost entirely fictional picture of abuse and cruelty. According to her narrative, I was a tyrannical monster who regularly forced meat on her, who threatened her with starvation, and who took a sadistic pleasure in tormenting her with animal products. Sandra sat up in bed beside me, her own phone lighting up the dark room. "Oh no, Sam," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep and dawning horror. "This is bad. Did you see what she wrote?" I showed her the post, the endless scroll of hateful comments beneath it. "She's made us sound like child abusers," I said, my voice flat. "Look at the comments," Sandra said, her face pale in the glow of her screen. "People are calling for Child Protective Services to investigate us. Sam, they're sharing our address." I jumped out of bed, a volatile cocktail of pure rage and sickening fear warring in my chest. Lily's bedroom door was closed, but I could hear her moving around inside. I knocked once, sharply, then entered without waiting for her permission. She was sitting at her desk, her laptop open, surrounded by printed-out articles about animal rights and successful protests. She looked up at me with the same defiant, righteous eyes from the night before. "I told the truth," she said before I could even speak. "You told lies," I said, holding up my phone to show her the venomous comment section. "You told twisted half-truths that you designed to make us look like monsters. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've exposed you for what you are," she said, turning back to her laptop as if I were a minor annoyance. "Maybe now you'll finally understand how serious this is." "Serious?" I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a dangerously low and controlled tone. "You want to talk about serious? You've publicly accused your parents of child abuse on the internet. You've shared our home address with thousands of strangers, many of whom are clearly unhinged. You have put this entire family in danger. The only thing in danger is your reputation," she said, her fingers clicking across the keys. "Maybe if you're so ashamed of your choices, you should start making better ones." I had to physically restrain myself from grabbing the laptop and throwing it against the wall. I took a deep, shuddering breath and forced myself to step back. "Take it down. Now." My voice was a command. "No," she replied without looking at me. "Take it down," I repeated, "or you will lose a lot more than your special fridge." She finally spun around in her chair to face me, a smirk on her face. What are you going to do? Kick me out? That'll look great for your case. Local man throws out compassionate teenage daughter for having vegan principles. I'm going to do what any responsible parent would do, I said. I'm going to set firm boundaries and enforce real-world consequences. I turned to leave, then paused in her doorway. You have 1 hour to remove those posts. All of them. Or what? She called after me, her voice dripping with teenage scorn. Or you'll find out that actions have consequences, I said without turning around. Real ones. Not the kind you can twist into a sob story for social media sympathy. I left her room, my hands shaking with a suppressed anger so intense it made me feel dizzy. Sandra was waiting for me in the hallway, her face drawn and pale with worry. What are we going to do, Sam? She whispered, her voice trembling. First, I said, heading downstairs, my mind racing, we document everything. Every post, every comment, every single lie. Then, I added as I started the coffee machine, needing the simple, familiar routine to steady my nerves, we contact a lawyer. A lawyer? Sandra looked horrified. Sam, she's our daughter. Our daughter, I replied, who just publicly accused us of child abuse on the internet. This isn't teenage rebellion anymore. Sandra, this is dangerous. My phone rang. It was my boss, Mr. Garrison. I answered with a sinking feeling of dread. Sam, what the hell is going on? He barked without any preamble. I've got people calling the restaurant nonstop, screaming that we employ child abusers. I've got a dozen emails from activist groups threatening to organize another, much larger protest this afternoon. The owner is absolutely furious. It's my daughter, I said, my voice weak. She's going through something. I'll handle it. You better handle it fast, he said, his voice grim. The owner wants to see you in his office at 9 o'clock sharp. And Sam, this had better not affect the restaurant again. He hung up. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. Lily had no idea what she had just set in motion. Or maybe she did, and she simply didn't care. An hour passed. I checked her social media. The posts were still up, gathering more shares and more angry, threatening comments by the minute. Some were calling for organized boycotts of the steakhouse. Others were suggesting reporting us to every authority they could think of. A few had even posted pictures of our house taken from Google Street View, with our address circled in red. I found Lily in the kitchen, calmly making herself a smoothie with ingredients from her special, sacred fridge. She didn't acknowledge my presence. The posts are still up, I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. She poured a splash of almond milk into the blender. I told you, I'm not taking them down. Then your fridge, I said, walking over to the appliance, goes to the curb. Today. She laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Go ahead. Add theft to your growing list of crimes. I'm sure that'll help your case with CPS. It's not theft, I said, yanking the plug from the wall socket. The hum of the motor died with a final, pathetic wheeze. I paid for it. I pay for the electricity that runs it. I pay for all the expensive food you put inside it. And now, I'm deciding that it is no longer welcome in my house. You can't do this, she shrieked, grabbing my arm, trying to stop me from moving the small refrigerator away from the wall. Mom, he's stealing my food. Sandra appeared in the doorway, still in her bathrobe, her face a mess of confusion and distress. Sam, wait, let's just think about this. I have thought about it, I said, starting to empty the fridge's contents onto the kitchen counter. She wants to play adult games. She gets to deal with adult consequences. She can keep the food, but the fridge goes. Lily, of course, was filming the entire thing on her phone, providing a tearful, dramatic narration for her followers. This is proof. You're literally stealing from me. You're destroying my property. I'm removing my property from my house, I said, my voice methodical and calm, despite the rage still simmering just beneath the surface. Just like you removed my property from my house yesterday morning when you threw my work clothes all over the lawn. That's different, she sobbed. Ow! I paused, genuinely curious to hear her twisted logic. Explain to me, Lily, how destroying my work clothes is any different from me removing a refrigerator that I bought. Because your clothes represent oppression and murder, she cried, tears streaming down her face now. My fridge just holds food. My clothes, I said, resuming my task, represent my job. The job that bought that very food. The job you are actively trying to destroy with your campaign of lies. Sandra stepped between us again. Both of you stop this. This is insane. Aren't we a family? Are we? I asked, setting down a container of artisanal cashew cheese with a thud. Because families don't try to destroy each other. Families don't spread malicious lies about each other on the internet. Families support each other, even when they disagree. Lily's phone rang. She answered it, her voice instantly shifting from a choked sob to a sweet, victimized tone. Hello. Yes, this is her. Oh my God, really? Yes, I could do an interview today. Let me just check with let me see if I can make that work. She hung up, her eyes bright with a manic, triumphant excitement. That was Channel 7 News, she announced. They want to interview me about standing up to carnage oppression in my own home. Absolutely not, Sandra said, her voice carrying a rare, steely edge. You are not going on national television to air our family's private business and spread these lies. You can't stop me, Lily shot back, clutching her phone like a weapon. I am 17. I have rights. And I have a story that people want to hear. You have lies that people want to believe, I said, finishing my task of emptying the fridge. And if you go on television to spread those lies, you won't have a home to come back to. Are you threatening to kick me out? She asked, a slow, calculating smile spreading across her face. Because that's perfect. Teenage vegan activist made homeless because parents can't accept her compassion. The headlines practically write themselves. I straightened up, meeting her cold, hard gaze. I'm telling you that choices have consequences. You want to be treated like an adult. Well, in the real world, adults who lie about their families, who bite the hand that feeds them, often find themselves having to feed themselves. Sam, Sandra's warning tone cut through the tense air. She's still our daughter. She's still a minor. For 7 more months, Lily added, her smile widening. Then I'm gone anyway. But until then, you're stuck with me. And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly what kind of horrible people you are. I grabbed the handle of the empty fridge and started wheeling it toward the garage. Then for the next 7 months, I said over my shoulder, you'll get to live with the consequences of your choices. No special fridge, no special shopping trips, no more bending over backwards to accommodate someone who shows us nothing but contempt. I'll call CPS myself. She followed me, her phone already in hand, recording again. I'll tell them you're starving me. Tell them whatever you want, I said, maneuvering the fridge through the doorway into the garage. Tell them about the full refrigerator and the full pantry just a few feet away. Tell them about the twice-weekly vegan dinners we've been making for 6 months. Tell them about the thousands of dollars we've spent supporting your every whim. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear the whole, entire story. She let out a scream of pure frustration and ran back inside. I heard her bedroom door slam, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. Sandra found me in the garage a few minutes later, just staring at the unplugged fridge, the symbol of our failed attempts at compromise. This is spiraling out of control, she whispered. She's the one spiraling it, I replied, leaning against the wall, a wave of profound exhaustion washing over me. I have to go meet with the owner in an hour. I might lose my job today because of her lies. Maybe we should consider family therapy, Sandra suggested, her voice small. With what money if I get fired? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Besides, she'd probably refuse to go, or she'd just use it as more ammunition for her victim narrative. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a coworker. Protesters are already gathering outside the restaurant. Owner is beyond mad. Good luck, man. I showed Sandra the message. Her face crumpled. What do we get here, Sam? How did our family become this? One meal at a time, I said, heading inside to get ready for what might be my very last day of work. One judgment at a time, one line crossed at a time, until there were no lines left at all. The drive to work felt like I was heading to my own execution. Sure enough, a small but vocal group of protesters had already gathered on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, holding signs with graphic, disturbing images of slaughterhouses. They recognized my car as I pulled into the parking lot and surged forward, shouting slogans about murder and karma and justice for animals. I had to park in the back and enter through the employee entrance just to avoid them. Inside, the kitchen staff gave me sympathetic, pitying looks but kept their distance. Nobody wanted to be associated with the drama, and I couldn't blame them. The owner, Mr. Garrison, was waiting for me in his office. He was a man in his 60s who had built the restaurant from the ground up, a tough but fair boss who valued stability and reputation above all else. The grim, stony expression on his face told me everything I needed to know about my chances of survival. Sit down, Sam, he said, his voice flat. I sat, my hands folded nervously in my lap like a schoolboy who had been called to the principal's office. 10 years, he said, shaking his head slowly. 10 years you've worked for me, Sam, without a single problem. You've been a model employee, never late, never complained, always willing to cover a shift for someone in need. And now this. Mr. Garrison, I swear, I'm handling it, I pleaded. My daughter, she's just going through a phase. A phase. He turned his computer monitor towards me. On the screen was Lily's viral video from the day before, the view count already over 100,000. Your daughter's phase has news vans pulling up outside my restaurant. The phone hasn't stopped ringing all morning with people making death threats and canceling their reservations. This is not a phase, Sam. This is a 5-alarm business crisis. I understand, sir, but I can't control what she does. I've tried talking to her, reasoning with her. Then try harder, he said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes hard. I like you, Sam. You're a good worker and a good man. But I have a business to run. I have 30 other employees whose livelihoods I have to protect. I cannot have this kind of disruption. Are you firing me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I'm giving you 1 week, he said. 1 week to get this under control. If there is one more incident, if those protesters don't disperse, if this affects our business one more time, he spread his hands in a gesture of finality. I'll have no other choice. I nodded, my throat tight. Understand. I hope you do, he said, turning the monitor back around. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your daughter is holding your entire career hostage, and you're trying to negotiate with a terrorist. I left his office and returned to my station in the kitchen, my legs feeling like lead. The lunch rush was supposed to be starting, but the dining room was eerily quiet. The protesters had done their job, scaring away our regular customers with their chants and their graphic signs. I tried to lose myself in the familiar, comforting routine of grilling steaks and prepping sides, but my mind kept circling back to the image of Lily's smug, triumphant smile. During my break, I checked my phone. The interview request from Channel 7 had been shared to Lily's social media, along with a passionate call for her supporters to share their own stories of Karna's depression. The comments section was a cesspool of pure, unadulterated hatred, all of it directed at me and Sandra. Then, a text from Sandra popped up. School just called. Lily left after second period. She told them she had a doctor's appointment. I think she's doing the interview, Sam. My hands clenched in a fist around the phone. She had actually done it. Despite our explicit refusal, despite the chaos she had already caused, she had skipped school to go and spread her lies on television. I called Sandra back. Can you stop her? I asked, my voice desperate. I'm trying to find out where they're filming, but the school doesn't know where she went. Sandra's voice was thick with tears. Sam, what are we going to do? This is destroying everything. I don't know, I said honestly, watching through the kitchen window as more protesters arrived outside. But she's made her choice. Now we have to make ours. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of worried thoughts and mechanical, robotic motions. Every time the kitchen door swung open, I expected to see a reporter with a camera or a group of angry activists. The kitchen staff whispered among themselves, and I caught hushed fragments of conversation about updating their resumes, about the restaurant potentially having to close. 10 years of building a career, a reputation, a life, and it was all being destroyed in a matter of days by my own daughter. I arrived home to find a news van parked on our street, its satellite dish pointed at the sky like a giant metallic mushroom. My stomach dropped. They had brought the circus to our front door. I parked down the block and slipped in through the backyard to avoid the cameras. Sandra met me at the door, her face pale and drawn. They've been here for an hour, she whispered. Lily is locked in her room. She's refusing to come out and talk to them. I think she's scared. Good, I said, my voice hard. Maybe she's finally starting to realize that actions have real, tangible consequences. I peered through the living room curtains. A reporter with perfect hair and a microphone stood on our lawn, gesturing dramatically at our house as she spoke to the camera. Did she do the interview? I asked. I don't know. She won't talk to me, Sandra said, wringing her hands. Sam, the neighbors are starting to complain. Mrs. Patterson from next door said that if this media circus doesn't stop soon, she's calling the police. Let her, I said. Maybe that's exactly what Lily needs to finally understand how serious this is. I found Lily in her room, her laptop open to various social media pages, the comments section a river of scrolling text. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I saw a flicker of uncertainty, of fear in her eyes. The reporters won't leave, she said quietly, her voice small. You invited them into our lives, Lily. I replied, my voice softer than I intended. You don't get to uninvite them just because it's become inconvenient for you. I sat on the edge of her bed. Did you do the interview? She nodded, her gaze fixed on her comforter. But they asked different questions than I expected. They want to know about you and Mom, about our whole family. They kept asking why I still lived here if you were so abusive. They made it sound like I was an ungrateful child attacking parents who had done nothing but support me. Imagine that, I said, my voice laced with a sarcasm I couldn't contain. That's not what this is about. The familiar fire returned to her eyes for a moment. This is about animal rights. It's about standing up for those who can't speak for themselves. No, Lily, I said, standing up. This isn't about the animals anymore. This is about you needing to be right so badly that you are willing to burn down your own family to prove your point. The owner of the restaurant gave me 1 week to fix this. 1 week, or I lose my job. Do you understand what that means for all of us? She lifted her chin, a flicker of her old defiance returning. Maybe you should get a job that doesn't involve murder. And maybe you should get a reality check about how the world actually works, I said, heading for the door. From now on, there are no more special accommodations. No more vegan dinner nights. No more expensive groceries. You want to be a vegan in this house? Fine, but you'll do it without our financial or emotional support, since you clearly don't value either one anyway. You can't do that, she cried. Watch me, I said, pausing in the doorway. You have 7 months until you turn 18, Lily. 7 months to figure out how to support your principles without destroying the people who love you. Because once you're an adult, the real world won't be nearly as forgiving as we have been. The next few days passed in a tense, miserable standoff. The protesters remained outside the restaurant, their numbers actually growing as Lily's story continued to spread online. The news van eventually disappeared from our street, but the damage was done. Our neighbors avoided us, crossing the street when they saw us coming. Sandra's own sister called to say she didn't feel comfortable bringing her kids over to our house anymore. Lily retreated into a state of self-righteous, silent martyrdom, eating only what she could prepare from the most basic ingredients, plain rice, canned beans, apples, and posting increasingly dramatic updates about her struggle and her persecution on her social media. She had become a minor celebrity in certain online circles, a teenage hero, a brave warrior standing up to her family's carnage oppression. I worked my shifts under a black cloud of impending doom, watching the restaurant's business decline day by day. Mr. Garrison stopped making eye contact with me when he passed through the kitchen. My coworkers spoke in hushed, worried tones about updating their resumes. On the fourth day of my one-week ultimatum, I came home to find Sandra sitting at the kitchen table, crying into her hands. She'd been let go from her part-time job as a receptionist at the local dental office. They said it wasn't personal, she sobbed, her body shaking. But patients were complaining. They'd seen the news story, seen Lily's posts. They didn't want to be treated by someone who abused their own child. I held her while she cried, my own eyes burning with hot, unshed tears of rage and helplessness. Lily had lit a single match, and now her entire life was going up in flames. That night, I made a decision. If Lily wanted to play hardball, if she wanted to see what real consequences looked like, then she was about to learn. After she and Sandra were asleep, I went through the kitchen and the pantry and gathered up every single vegan product in the house. The expensive almond milk, the organic soy milk, the meat substitutes, the nutritional yeast she sprinkled on everything like fairy dust. I boxed it all up and put it in the garage, right next to her unplugged fridge. When she came down for breakfast the next morning, she found only regular, non-vegan food in the kitchen. "Where's my food?" she demanded, her eyes wide with disbelief. "In the garage, with your fridge," I said, not looking up from the morning newspaper I was pretending to read. "You want it? You can go and store it out there. But it is no longer welcome in my kitchen." "You're trying to starve me," she shrieked. "There's plenty of food," I said, turning a page. "Bread, peanut butter, fruits, vegetables, oatmeal. All perfectly vegan-friendly. But the special treatment, the expensive accommodations, are over. You destroyed that privilege along with our family's reputation." She grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and stormed out of the house. But for the first time, I could see the cracks forming in her armor of self-righteousness. The reality of what she had done was finally, slowly, starting to sink in. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, a large, thick-cut steak, because I was done hiding my own choices in my own home, Lily appeared in the doorway. She looked younger than her 17 years, fragile and vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in months. "Dad," she said, her voice small and shaky. "The kids at school, they're saying things. About our family. About you and Mom." I continued seasoning the meat, my back to her. "Those are called consequences, Lily. You put our private business all over the internet, and now everyone feels entitled to have an opinion." "But they're lying," she said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "They're saying you hit me, that you locked me in my room, that you—" She trailed off, a sob catching in her throat. "That's not what I said in my post." "No," I said, turning to face her. "You just said we were abusers. You said we were forcing meat on you. You said we were monsters." People just filled in the blanks with their own twisted imaginations. "That's what happens when you air your dirty laundry in public for the world to see. I just wanted people to understand," she whispered. "Understand what? That you have parents who love you enough to accommodate your every choice, who have spent thousands of dollars supporting your lifestyle, who only asked for a little bit of respect in return." I placed the steak in a hot pan, the sizzle filling the silence between us. "Well, message received, Lily." Loud and clear. She fled upstairs, and I ate my dinner alone. Sandra had taken to eating in our bedroom, unable to face the battlefield our dining room had become. On the sixth day, with just 24 hours left before Mr. Garrison's deadline, I made one last, desperate attempt at reason. I found Lily in her room, dark circles under her eyes, scrolling through her phone with a manic, obsessive intensity. "The protesters need to go," I said without preamble. "You need to call them off, or I'll lose my job tomorrow." She looked up, and I saw something shift in her expression, a crumbling of her defiant facade. I can't," she stammered. "They won't listen to me anymore. I tried. They say I'm not committed enough to the cause because I still live with carnists. Then make a public statement." I urged. "Go online and tell the truth. Tell them we're not abusers. Tell them we supported you. Tell them this has all gone too far." "But then I'll lose everything," she cried, her voice breaking. "My followers, my platform, my community. Your family has already lost everything." The words exploded out of me, a torrent of a week's worth of pain and frustration. "Your mother lost her job. I'm about to lose mine. Our neighbors won't speak to us. Our friends won't talk to us. And you're worried about losing your online followers?" She started to cry then, not the performative, manipulative tears she used for her videos, but real, gut-wrenching sobs. For once, I didn't rush to comfort her. I was done enabling her victim complex. "Fix this, Lily," I said, my voice hard but not unkind. "However you can. Or you'll have to live for the rest of your life with the knowledge that you destroyed your own family for the approval of a bunch of strangers on the internet." I left her there, sobbing into her pillow, and went to spend what I was sure would be my last evening as an employed man. Sandra and I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, not talking about tomorrow. As darkness fell, I heard Lily's footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, her phone in her hand, looking like she had aged 10 years in the past week. "I made a video," she said quietly, explaining that you're not abusers, that I exaggerated, that the protesters should leave the restaurant alone. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to feel any sense of relief. "Good. But Dad," she said, biting her lip, "I don't think it'll be enough. The comments, people are calling me a traitor, a sellout. They're saying I've been brainwashed by carnist propaganda." "Then you've learned a valuable lesson about mob mentality," I said, standing up, my bones creaking with fatigue. "You can't control a fire once you've lit it, Lily. You can only watch it burn and hope it doesn't consume everything you love." The next morning, I drove to work, not knowing if I would still have a job by lunchtime. The protesters were still there, though perhaps fewer in number, or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Mr. Garrison called me into his office at 10 o'clock sharp. His expression was unreadable as I sat across from him. "The video your daughter posted last night has helped," he said slowly. "Some of the online heat has died down. But Sam," he sighed, a heavy, tired sound, "the damage is done. Our reservations for the next month are down 60%. 3 of our regular corporate clients have canceled their long-standing contracts. The other servers are threatening to quit if the harassment from the phone calls doesn't stop." My heart sank. "So, I'm fired," I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "I'm putting you on unpaid leave," he said. 2 weeks. Let's see if this whole thing can blow over completely. If things return to something resembling normal, you can come back. If not," he spread his hands. "I am sorry, Sam. I really am. But I have a business to think of." I nodded, understanding even as my world was crumbling around me. "Thank you for giving me a chance." I cleaned out my locker, said my awkward goodbyes to my coworkers, who mostly avoided my eyes, and drove home to a future that was suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. At home, I found Lily waiting for me in the living room. She looked small and lost, the righteous warrior facade completely crumbled away, leaving behind just a scared, remorseful teenager. "I'm sorry," she whispered as I walked in, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I believe so strongly in the cause, and I thought if I could just make you understand." I sat down beside her on the couch, suddenly feeling every single one of my 45 years. "Understanding isn't the same as agreeing, Lily," I said, my voice rough with exhaustion. "And respect has to go both ways. You demanded that we respect all of your choices while showing absolutely none for ours." "I know," she said, wiping her eyes. "The vegan groups I was in, the people online, they kept pushing me to do more, to be more radical. They said that if you really loved me, you'd change for me. They told me I was brave and strong for standing up to you. And now, they're all calling me weak, a disappointment, a fake vegan." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I gave up my family for their approval, and they dropped me the second I showed a moment of doubt." I put my arm around her, and she collapsed against me, sobbing with an intensity one hadn't seen since she was a small child who had fallen off her bike. "We're still here, Lily," I said, stroking her hair. "Damaged, hurt, but we're still here. The question is, what do we do now?" "I don't know." Her voice was muffled against my shirt. "How do I fix this? How do I undo all the damage I've caused?" "You can't," I said honestly. "Not completely. Some bridges, once you burn them, can't ever be rebuilt in quite the same way. But you can learn from it. You can do better going forward. You can remember that your family is more important than any ideology, and that love requires compassion, not just conviction." We sat there for a long time, a father and a daughter, surveying the wreckage of our choices. Outside, the world went on. Inside, we began the slow, painful work of trying to rebuild what could be salvaged from the ashes of our family civil war. The steakhouse survived, though it took months for the business to fully recover. I eventually returned to work, but things were never quite the same. The easy camaraderie in the kitchen was gone, replaced by a cautious, watchful professionalism. Some customers still recognized me from the news, whispering behind their hands as I walked through the dining room. Sandra found a new job, though it was for lower pay and with fewer hours. The stress of the ordeal had aged her, adding new lines to her face and more gray to her hair. She forgave Lily, as mothers almost always do, but trust, once so thoroughly broken, mends slowly and is never as strong as it was before. And Lily, she remained a vegan, but she became a quiet one. There was no more preaching, no more signs, no more social media crusades. She ate her meals with us, even when we had meat on our plates, though she still couldn't quite hide the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She learned to cook amazing, creative vegan food, and she would often share it with us, not as a piece of propaganda, but as a simple, loving gift. The special fridge remained in the garage, a silent monument to our family's most difficult chapter. Sometimes on the weekends, I'd see Lily standing in front of it, just looking at it, lost in thought, perhaps remembering a time when her principles seemed worth any price, including the happiness of her own family. She had learned, as we all had, that righteousness without compassion is just another form of cruelty. That believing you are right doesn't give you the right to destroy those who disagree with you. And that family, as imperfect and frustrating and messy as it might be, deserves more consideration and more loyalty than a crowd of strangers on the internet who will cheer you on from the safety of their keyboards and then abandon you the moment you are no longer useful to their cause. The peace we found was fragile, but it was real, and it was ours.